I would like to say today, and what I believe is happening, and it's the only conclusion I can come to, when the top scientific mind driving the decisions in America, well, two of them really, right? You've got Anthony Fauci and you got Deborah Birx. What is it that, why are they not moving forward with a potential cure? I mean, if we have a treatment, folks, then this entire lockdown is over, right? And yet, what has been the delay? So while everyone in the country and around the world want to be looking at when did we really say this was serious in the United States of America and when do we start our mitigation efforts, I'd actually like to pose a different view of this incredible death rate in America now, which my understanding is, as of today, we're saying it's 33,460. We've reported on many ways, and we'll have more reports later on the show about why that number is probably really quite bloated. But let's go with that number for now, 33,460. I want to take you to the graphs on the board. Take a look at this. Okay. This is daily new cases, right, in the United States of America on a daily basis. Now, what I want to discuss is the timeline of these cases. As you can see, remember, this is not an accumulation. These are the daily. Every day they got more and more per day were being announced, okay? So let's be perfectly clear on the discussion that's happened in America and when decisions were made, okay? And I did this at the last second. This really just occurred to us. This is how we do it on the high wire. We're putting together. So this could be a little bit prettier, but I think you're going to get the idea, and I might have to insert a couple of ideas. But let's get started, shall we? All right, starting on February 15th. Now, this is what Anthony Fauci was really having to address. On February 15th, Fauci had mentioned that this is minuscule, that the problem of coronavirus really is not that big, and therefore it's a minuscule problem, all right? He ended up being wrong. It's okay. Everybody gets it wrong sometimes, but that's February 15th. Well, the biggest story I think there was the top virologist in France, Didier Raoult, said this was on February 25th. He had a study going on in China, and he said, it is game over for the coronavirus. We have done studies with hydroxychloroquine, and we have had such an incredible success that I'm going to paraphrase here, but he basically said, not only is this a respiratory virus that we can treat, this is one of the easiest respiratory viruses we've ever had to treat. That happened on February 25th. Now, right here on March, I think it's 6th, Andrew Cuomo in New York prohibits the use of hydroxychloroquine in New York, a very odd choice after really the counterpart to Fauci in France is saying, game over. Cuomo's saying, I'm going to make it very difficult for you to use this as doctors. That's happening right here around March 5th. And then, all of a sudden, right around March 7th and 8th, Fauci now changes his tune. No longer is this a minuscule event. Now we can say that it's looking quite serious, okay? So it's quite serious as of March 7th, all right? And then here, Donald Trump, let's remember that right around March 16th, right? March 16th is right where we started, bringing in social distancing. And by, March 28th over here is when we would finally have the lockdown. But that's not my point. This is what they want to talk about. I want to talk about this. On March 20th, I believe it was, 19th and 20th, we have Donald Trump fighting the FDA and demanding that they give compassionate use for chloroquine, saying, I don't care that it's off-label. There's so much success around the world. As President of the United States, I want this made available. So he fights and achieves this. He gets the FDA to loosen up on hydroxychloroquine. We should be allowing this to be used on patients. So that's all the way here. And then right around March 22nd, we have Dr. Zelenko in New York that is saying, I've treated hundreds. It ended up over the next few days, he said, I treated 699 patients with this with an over 90% success rate. All right? All of this happening, but look what's happening to our death rate. While all these conversations, Trump sees it coming. He opens up chloroquine. We have a guy and multiple doctors in here saying, huge success. Some of the clips we showed you, huge success. What? This is new cases. All right, these are new cases, right. These are new cases going up like this the entire time. While all of this is happening, we are marching towards a death rate of 33,000, right? We are now in the the throes of it. Back here 2 weeks ago, we're announcing that we know the final peak is coming. And then all of a sudden here, all the way over here, this is when Fauci's NIH decides to start the first chloroquine study. Is now at the peak. Once this thing is almost over and we're now discussing going back to work, and the New York Times is saying tens of thousands of people have died, this thing was horrible, this horrible death rate, what responsibility will be laid at the feet of Anthony Fauci for not listening all the way back here? Back here when Didier Raoult said, game over. On February 25th, Anthony Fauci waited till April 9th to start a trial on this product. I think that sounds outrageous. I believe this will go down in history as perhaps one of the most dangerous decisions ever made. And by the way, we're not just talking about hydroxychloroquine here. There are studies of, remdesivir. There are also studies where they're oxygenating blood because we're now seeing this as an oxygen issue, as we discussed last week. We also know that there are, some trials on using blood products that have already got the antibodies of people that were infected. But none of this is seeing $1 billion. We don't see 20,000, 100 studies going on here, putting $1 billion here. So these people won't be at risk, so that 33,000 people don't die. That didn't happen. And I think that's the biggest story of all of it. Is it possible that we were so blinded, that our health officials were so blinded by the beautiful dream of the vaccine unicorn that they didn't fund anything to stop this and treat it now? And I have one last thing to show you. Perhaps my most dramatic attempt to give you, really that inconvenient truth, which goes something like this. If you take this scale and you bring it all the way back and back and back and back, continuing back, what we find all the way back here in 2005, and let's be reasonable, if I really had the right lighting, I'd be out of this building and across the street compared to that graph right there, where Fauci waited over 8 weeks, or roughly 8 weeks, from the moment Didier Raoult says, game over, chloroquine works. Back in 2005, the NIH, where Anthony Fauci has worked since the 1980s, funded a hydroxychloroquine study that looked at its use on SARS coronavirus. This study right here. And if I read you the conclusion, it says, chloroquine is effective in preventing the spread of SARS-CoV in cell culture. Favorable inhibition of virus spread was observed when the cells were either treated with chloroquine prior to or after SARS-CoV infection. That's huge. Meaning all the way back in 2005, studies had been done showing that this may be an effective treatment. And this study even refers to the fact that the SARS-CoV was attaching to ACE2. The same thing we're seeing with this COVID-19. How much information about chloroquine did Anthony Fauci have? And why didn't we beat China? Why didn't we beat Didier Raoult to this discussion? Why didn't America show the world, hey, we looked at this all the way back in 2005, and now we're ramping up hundreds or thousands of studies to see if we had it right, to make sure we have a treatment, because if we have a treatment, then people don't have to die. And if that less than 1% that do die don't die, everyone can go back to work. You see, this was known. When Anthony Fauci said we were wondering about the harms of mitigation, like locking people down, what if you didn't have to lock down anyone? Had you done studies over the last several years or right at that moment? Let's look back at chloroquine. And to this date, right now, there is no treatment, no chloroquine, no remdesivir, nothing being used as the protocol in the United States of America. And I think that is egregious. I think it's dangerous. And when we look at timing is perhaps one of the most shocking stories that we will continue to cover. How long will it take to get to a treatment? That is the question. And why aren't we working harder for a treatment?